This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Welcome back, everybody, to the X-Cast. As ever, the truth is in here. I'm your host today, Carl Sweeney, and thank you very much for joining me for this episode, which is all about the 16th episode of Season 8, which is 3 Words. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined on this podcast by 2 people I've had the great pleasure to podcast with before, but never at the same time, so this is going to be a fun one. So I'll say hi to Luke Winch, first of all. Hi, Luke.
Hey, Carl. How you doing?
Doing really well, thanks. It's been a little while on the X-Cast since we've been together, isn't it? I think the Fight the Future Minute series.
Yeah, we did. I think we did some scenes on a fire engine, and you were doing some pop quiz, cultural factoids about firemen and fire engines. So that was good fun. Yeah,
that was good fun. And since then, we've also had a bit of a Larry night out in Birmingham, haven't we? But
we have indeed.
No microphones were on for that, which is probably a good thing. And joining Luke and myself is Clara Cook. Hi, Clara. Good to talk to you again.
Hi, Carl. Nice to speak to you again. And you too, Luke, actually.
Oh, it's been a while.
Sorry, that sounded a bit rude, didn't it? And you, Luke. No, nice to see both of you. It's been a long time since I've been on a podcast with 2 other people. 3. Oh. It's a magic number.
So how's life treating you, Clara?
Good. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm living a better life than the characters in this particular podcast, this particular episode that we're going to discuss, specifically Scully. But it's going okay. I'm enjoying the podcasting. I enjoyed watching this episode again because I haven't seen it in years.
I think the only person who's leading a really good life here is probably Frohickey, isn't it? He seemed really delighted to see Mulder again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone else has got their own issues. Everyone
else is very angst-ridden, aren't they?
Absolutely. So like I said, this is 3 Words. It's an episode that was written by Chris Carter and Frank Spotnitz, as so many were. And this was directed by Tony Warmby. First broadcast on April the 8th, 2001, in the US and Canada, that is. And this is the episode in which a man who claims to have information about an alien invasion is killed on the White House lawn. Or shoots himself on the White House lawn, I think, doesn't he? Okay, before we come to this episode specifically, Luke, first time we've spoken to you, I think, this season, isn't it? So what are your general thoughts on season 8? We've been asking that to everybody, and there's a real range of opinions on this season, which is fascinating. Where do you stand?
I love this season. It's probably my second favourite season after 3, which is my first choice of my favourite season. But I love season 8. I think it has a real energy to it that was certainly lacking in season 7. I think the departure or the choice by Devicomte to just do half a season and not having much of him at the front end of the season really gave the writers new dynamics to play with characters, and they just seemed to be, the writing and the episodes just seemed to have a bit more excitement, a bit more enthusiasm to it, and it was just, I think it was refreshing for some of the audience as well, because I think season 7, you could see Duchovny, or I thought I could see Duchovny getting just a little bit autopilot on some of the episodes, and just kind of the whole season just seemed a bit worn and a bit tired. So season 8 really kicks off well with within and without. It has a great run of episodes to establish Doggett, who I really like. I think Robert Patrick's fantastic as Agent Doggett, and kind of have his and Scully's relationship evolve, and that really comes to a head in this episode as well. So yeah, I love season 8. The back end of season 8 is interesting because Mulder's back. You've got, he's kind of come back to this established new relationship between Scully and Doggett, and even Skinner. I think he's taken on a kind of new role, really, or a more prominent role in season 8. And I think the main theme for me for season 8 is transition and change. There's a lot of change going on, and a lot of kind of the X-Files is changing in ownership and also in the way it works. And really behind the scenes, we're just getting ready for Duchovny's departure at the end of the season. So it's very much a transitional season, but it's a great one with some fantastic episodes.
Where do you stand, Clara? And you've probably discussed this on the Xcast already this season, I think, because you were on an earlier episode, but I haven't heard that yet. So I'm just curious myself where you sort of sit on, where do you stand on season 8?
I don't mind season 8 so much. I agree with Luke that it sort of, the energy is boosted at the start of season 8 by David Duchovny's absence and the inclusion of Doggett as a character, a new character. I think that kind of is a nice, like a welcome change. I agree with Luke. After sort of season 7, the end of season 7, or the last few episodes in season 7 do sort of seem to be slowing down the sort of pace of the series. I think by this point in season 8, though, I have lost a lot of my enthusiasm, and I have mixed feelings about Fox Mulder's return, and that isn't to say that I don't like seeing Fox Mulder. Fox Mulder is one of my favourite characters in the X-Files, but by this point in the season and this point in the series, I'm kind of done with this storyline, this mythic arc, and I'm just waiting for Monica and Doggett to get started as a duo, investigating other X-Files and other mysteries. As Scully's angst and melancholy is starting to kind of sort of grate on my nerves a bit. Not that, like, Scully doesn't deserve to be unhappy, or not deserve, she doesn't deserve to be unhappy, but not that she shouldn't legitimately be unhappy with the situation. It's obviously upsetting. And, you know, I generally have a problem with storylines about people coming back from the dead. I just always have, in any particular franchise. Cough, cough, Star Trek. So, Lost, Fringe, I mean, pretty much anything, really. So this particular episode I find quite... Well, it's not this episode, actually. It's Dead Alive.
Oh, yeah.
It's the one before, yeah. But then also the shadows of it in this episode I also find a little bit hard to deal with. So if you were to ask me to choose between season 8 and season 9, I would say season 9. But if you were to ask me to choose between season 7 and season 8, I would say season 8. So if you were asked me to choose all across the whole of the X-Files, I wouldn't choose season 8. But you know, okay. But I mean, there's some really good storytelling in season 8. Yeah. But I think the episode I just did for Xcast was, I can't even remember, it was that bad. But it was in season 8, and you know, by that point, I think the sort of pace is sort of starting to die down.
What was it about? Let us guess the episode.
Oh, it's a guy who through an industrial accident at a salvage yard. Yeah.
Salvage.
This is awful.
Salvage, it's called. Yeah.
It's called Salvage. Okay, this is awful because I recorded it like literally a couple of weeks ago, and I've completely forgot the name of it.
Yeah,
but
no, it's not the best. It's not the best. No. Just on when you say about people coming back from the dead, are you just saying? Do you mean because it stretches credulity too far? Is that what you're saying with Mulder here, but some of the other examples too that you're thinking about?
Yeah. So in certain circumstances, like say for instance, another science fiction franchise like Star Trek, it's in its own particular narrative universe. It's more fantastical, you know, and even to a certain extent, Fringe I feel is much more fantastical. But the X-Files I feel is supposed to be rooted in our world. And so there's problems there. Obviously, they can't have an alien invasion, which they keep predicting, but they can have an alien invasion, a real one, an apocalyptic alien invasion in the X-Files, because there is been no apocalyptic alien invasion in our universe. So kind of the problem with Marvel, like, did aliens attack New York? No, of course they haven't. But they have to sort of make it out that even Marvel's more fantastical. So, but the X-Files, it's supposed to still be within the extreme possibility of like extreme believable possibility, the extreme side of it, right? You know, I don't know, shape-shifting aliens or whatever, but still like kind of like we could kind of imagine it in our world. And I don't think a man could ever come back from the dead 6 months after being dead, and that his apartment could still be the same. Like Scully paying the rent on like his apartment 6 months after he's dead. Do you know what I mean? Stuff like this. Like I just don't buy it. Mulder, you're cured. Yeah. You're in perfect health. He's been dead and
we'll talk about that.
Buried.
Definitely.
But yeah. Anyway, So it's because it takes me out of the storyline, and it reminds me I'm watching a TV show.
Yeah. Luke, do you have any of those qualms? Because Clara's right, isn't she? That dead alive. He's been buried there for quite a few months. Is it quite too much to ask us to swallow? Do you know what I mean?
It is a bit, but I don't think. But I don't think I'm hung up on it as much as Clara is. But yeah, because it has to do with Alien and Alien and Varus and what they've been doing to him, I can kind of accept the fact that there's this very. I even think the doctors say that he's basically, his metabolism is almost undetectable, but it's still going. There's still some kind of insulation going on in his body. So yeah, it's bonkers for the X-Files. It is approaching bonkers levels, but I kind of enjoy it because of that for some reason. But I think this episode, is I can kind of just push that aside with the previous episode and just enjoy this story.
Well, let's move on to this episode then. And I'm kind of curious now to see where you both are landing in terms of a score and things like that. So, Luke, do you want to kick us off? General thoughts on the mark out of 10 for this one?
I really enjoy this episode. And just to say, this is my first myth arc episode of the X-Cast, so I'm very excited to I've never been able to have, and it's a great cast of kind of mythology episode people in this as well, so it's great. I really enjoy this episode. It's quite formulaic in the myth arc sense. There's a lot of beats that happen in a lot of myth arc episodes, but I don't mind that because there's also a sense of familiarity that comes with that, and I think we've missed that a bit with Mulder being gone, so I quite like that aspect of it. Again, I was saying that that this whole season's about transition, and I think this is kind of the apex. This episode acts as a kind of apex of that transition for me. There's Mulder's back, but he feels very displaced. He feels very out of time, and that's very evident, I think, in this episode. And I really like the way that's kind of brought forward. Yeah, I just love all the lone gunmen coming in and doing their bit, and Fro Hickey's rather intimate hug, and stuff like that. And yeah, I think 3 words is very much a crystallization of the transition that is happening in season 8. So I'd probably give it an 7.58 out of 10, I think. Okay,
I'm just going to speculate from what you said earlier, Clara, that you're maybe a little bit lower. Is that right? How much lower?
Yeah. So I think I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10. But it might be slightly different if I could remember what I rated all the other episodes that I've been podcasting about. Like, if I think about back to, like, Alpha and Salvage and all the other episodes, because I think sometimes I might have been a bit too high on that and maybe a bit too low on this. But right now, in the moment, what I feel is 6 out of 10. I think that there's lots of good things about the episode. I think that, it's nice to see the lone gunman again. It's, I don't think David Duchovny does a bad job at acting. There's some really good lines, really good bits of dialogue. I think that Robert Patrick, as usual, does a great job. I mean, he's almost a flawless performance in almost every episode he's ever in. So that's good. This sort of dynamic between the two of them, I think, is kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. There are some downsides for me, which is that I feel like Scully is a very passive character in it, that she basically doesn't really do anything. There's a lot of, like, going round in circles, like Scully tells Skinner something, Skinner tells Doggett, then Doggett tells Scully, and then Scully tells Mulder, and then, Skinner tells Doggett, and Doggett tells Mulder, and in a way that I sort of feel like if they all just got together in the same room and they all discussed everything in one go, like in a meeting, they just sort it out. There's also sort of long-winded ways of getting home the point, which is that there are aliens among us, or there are people who've been abducted and now are shapeshifters, or fake people or whatever. And the unusual sort of X-Files style, some guy quotes a Bible verse like the lion shall walk with the sheep or something, or fight the future, here's a tiny little CD, and you really just wish somebody would just say, like, aliens are coming to take over the planet. Yeah. Like, and this would be fine if this had been in season 5 or season 4. But, like, we're in season 8 now. We already had a movie called Fight the Future. We've already heard Fight the Future. So, at this point, it's just way too late for me, and it's way too slow. But I wonder if this is because I'm watching it on repeated viewing. So maybe this episode does much better if you are watching it for the first time and you don't know what's on the CD-ROM. and you don't know what the story is going to be, or if in the course of the last 20 years you've forgotten the mythology storyline. So yeah. So mean. I'm so mean.
No, I don't think so. I'm a bit closer to Luke, though, just in terms of the score anyway, but I agree with some of the things you say, actually, Clara. So I've written down 7.5 for me. I think it's an episode that does a lot of things pretty well, to be honest. I think that the writers have intuited that there are certain things we're sort of anticipating now that Mulder's back. And I think they've also sort of surmised that it's maybe a good way to handle this is to not give us all those things immediately. So I think it's good that Mulder isn't back on the X-Files department straight away. I think it makes a lot of sense that he isn't firing on all cylinders immediately on a personal level, which of course we'll talk about. I think it makes a lot of good sense that he isn't Doggett's buddy from the get-go, and so on. And I think all that works well. I think that, so what I mean, I suppose there are a lot of character dynamics and character beats here that feel kind of new, even as the episode is doing some things that are quite familiar. Like there are real shades of something like Memento Mori, isn't there, with the suspense scene in that building that they break into. You know, it's reminiscent of what happened in that earlier episode, but it still feels like there's some new stuff going on, which is good. I like that. I sort of feel, though, on the other hand, that, and I think this about quite a few of these late season 8 episodes, I feel like they're a bit overdetermined in the sense that I feel like now that there are so many main characters, or at least now that there are more main characters, I think they find it harder to do really detailed like character studies. So one of the interesting things to ponder here, and it'd be interesting to hear what you both think, is I'm watching this and I'm wondering, well, is Mulder experiencing something like PTSD? Now, I'm not in a position to sort of diagnose that, obviously, but I would just note that there are certain things that would seem to support that idea, at least. You know, he appears to be having these flashbacks, which means it seems like he's re-experiencing what he's been through with his abduction. Things like irritability and angry outbursts are also associated with PTSD, from what I can gather. But I think the problem is that because this episode is doing quite a few other things, it doesn't become the kind of intricate character study of Mulder that it would have been good to have somewhere in this later part of the season, perhaps. I would also agree with Clara. I think there's a sense that Scully is too passive here, with some, maybe a few good moments, but on the whole. Now, I don't think that, you know, I don't think that necessarily has to be avoided in every single episode. I think there are going to be times when Scully isn't going to be the centre of attention, isn't going to be driving the plot. But I do have some qualms about some of the aspects here, which, again, we'll speak about as we go along. So, on the whole, though, I do like it. I think it's compelling, fast-moving, pretty exciting. So pretty enjoyable overall. I don't know, do either of you, when I say there are too many main characters and maybe it gets in the way of them doing a character study, does that resonate with either of you? Clara, would you say?
Yeah, so I can't remember the name of it. But isn't there an episode where Mulder has it's this many seasons before this, where he goes and he has some sort of brain, I want to say it's almost like a lobotomy, yeah, some sort of brain experiment. Yes. Demons,
isn't it? And I podcasted about that with a wonderful woman from London called Clara, actually. So long ago, wasn't it?
I was like, can you not remember her name? And I was like, oh, no, wait, it's me. That was me.
Yeah, that's the one, yeah.
Yeah,
Demons.
no, but that's a prime example of a good episode that delves into Mulder's psychology and also has flashbacks in it and shows what it means to have some sort of either brain injury or some sort of I don't say psychotic episode, some sort of either psychosis or some sort of
trauma,
psychological trauma, yeah. And I'm not saying they have to do a whole episode devoted to that for Mulder, but I think you genuinely feel a lot more interested in Mulder's psychology in that particular episode than you do in this one. There's no time to really look at Mulder's mental state in this because of the storyline, I imagine, because of all the other stuff happening. So yeah, I agree with you in that respect.
I was also thinking about Demons, actually, as a good example of where it's done quite well. And also maybe something like Irresistible from Scully's perspective. Luke, do you feel like there's a sense that there are too many characters being juggled in this part of the season? Or do you think maybe there's a case for that's a good thing, perhaps? I don't know. What do you think?
I think in terms of doing any kind of character study for any of the characters, particularly Mulder coming back, I think in terms of that, there may be a few too many balls to juggle, particularly in this episode, because you've got everyone I mean, you've literally got everyone kind of in one place or another. I think the X-Files tends to look at these things generally from a surface level. I mean, when Scully came back from her abduction, I think, what was the one straight after?
It's a Firewalker.
Firewalker. I mean, she was straight back into work because she was like, I need something to put my back up against. I need to work. And in a way, Mulder does that here. Because there's that thing where he kind of gets up from the couch and just like, I need to get back to work. So I think in that sense, that's how the writers kind of say, okay, he's got issues to deal with. He's going to do his work because that's how he's going to deal with the problem. So I think that's kind of how they're doing it. And I think they have to do that because you can only really look at a surface level of the emotional and psychological impact that Mulder's had from his abduction. So I think in terms of juggling all the different ensemble pieces, I think that's all they can do in this episode. Yeah. And because he's going to be leaving in like 4 or 5 episodes' time, there's really no point doing it either.
Okay, before we get into the episode breakdown then, what do you both think this episode is rated at on the IMDb? Out of 10 to the nearest decimal place? Luke, do you want to have the first guess?
I think probably 8.2 because it's Mulder's first like proper episode.
Yep.
Like 8.2.
8.2. Higher or lower, Clara?
I would say maybe a bit higher, maybe like 8.6.
Oh.
I'm just guessing, but like definitely in the 8s, surely.
It is
because people love Mulder.
It is in the 8s, yeah. It's 8.1.
Oh,
pretty close.
They don't love him that much.
Yeah. Well, they love him to the extent that this is the 8th highest rated episode for the season. Okay, so 8th highest for the season, Luke. Does that strike you as about right? Bit high, bit low?
About right, I think. I mean, I gave it 7.5 to 8. I'm kind of bordering on those two, so I might sit somewhere by the end of the episode.
Yeah. Well, let's find out. Let's talk about this episode in a little bit more detail. Okay, so we'll start at the teaser sequence, which takes us to the White House at Washington DC. It's a very short, sharp teaser, isn't it? It's the guy climbing the fence, wants to see the president, says something about aliens taking over the US. He shoots himself, and he's got that disc, hasn't he, with the words "Fight the future," the iconic words. Clara, I saw you saying something on our Facebook group earlier about the CD itself as an object. What, you just found it a bit retro? Was that
I mean, it wasn't at the time, was it? I mean, it's not the poor guy's fault, but it's just because, if you buy a laptop now, it doesn't come with a CD-ROM. And actually, I had a conversation with a friend the other day, and she said that one of her friends had requested her medical records from the NHS, and obviously she paid a fee, and they sent her records on a CD-ROM. So now she has she has to actually buy, just spend the money on buying a disc reader to go with her laptop in order to read the CD. And that's exactly what I thought of. I just thought of the actual guard taking the CD out of his hand and being like, I'm gonna have to adapt my computer. It just seems so archaic that I was escalating it in my mind. I was like, imagine if we handed over like a parchment with like the information about the conspiracy written in Latin, or like pulled out the Rosetta Stone, or I don't know, like a medieval book or something. I was just escalating it in my head. But yeah, it's just because it seems funny to us now in 2022. I mean, at the time, it was probably the height of technology. But also, Fight the Future written, it just seems USB stick with a password like taped across it. Do you know what I mean? It just seemed clunky. But I guess at the time, it made sense.
Yeah, you got to protect physical media these days. That's what I think. I'm here for this. Luke, what did you think of that and this teaser, actually? Like I say, it's a short, sharp one, isn't it? But seems to be a bit of a Season 8 trend. I think certain other episodes, like Within, have a really brisk teaser as well. But what did you think of this one?
2 things jumped out at me. One, I'm not sure leather gloves are the best thing for gripping onto metal fences. Because he does slide down a bit. Anyway, that was just the scrambler in me kind of looking at it. But yeah, it's a good, sharp, effective one. I thought the armed forces took a little bit too long to kind of appear. He ran a long way into the grounds before they even appeared. And if you watch like The West Wing, there's like Secret Service guys everywhere on the lawn and all around. So I was like, come on, guys. you paid a lot to do this job. Let's just get out there a bit quicker. But yeah, yeah, it was good. It was short, sharp, effective. The fight the future on the disc is a little bit on the nose, isn't it? I'm confused, and now I may be remembering this wrong. What is on that disc? Do we find out what's on that disc? Actually, on that disc, because I can't remember. Is it in this episode?
Yeah.
So it's all the information, all the data, isn't it?
It's the census data, isn't it, that shows that people who are targeted and then abducted and then
replaced. Is that
replaced?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering
Supposedly.
why that's the password that Mulder eventually has to input into the computer.
Because isn't it the guy who actually created the disc who's the census worker? Like, basically, he's a public servant.
Yeah.
Isn't he isn't he part of the UFO group? Because he himself has been abducted before in the past, and he wants to fight the future. I think it's him being lyrical, like poetical.
Yeah.
Like,
It just confuses because there's 2 workstations, so anybody could sit there and want to access that census data. If another worker was like, well, why is the password fight the future? It's just my head started thinking all this, and it got me a bit confused about why it'd be. I know why he wants it as fight the future, because he's wanting to fight against the conspiracy, but it just confused me later on when there's like, there's 2 terminals, so there must be other workers that have to come into this room and access the data, and they'd have to know that the password is fight the future. It just seemed a bit odd to me.
is it how it's actually written on the CD? Like, is it capital F, fight, space, the, space,
Underscore.
capital F, future?
I don't know.
Do you know what I mean? Is that what it is? Or because can you imagine reading that out to people? But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's just very strange.
Yeah, very strange. But to go back to your point, Luke, about the guy ran a long way. I mean, you do hear about people getting into places like Buckingham Palace, don't you? And it does happen that these really high security places get penetrated, doesn't it? So I don't know. I suppose you expect them to be right on top of him, don't you? Like immediately. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite a long way from the fence to the front of the White House, and I just expected the armed guards to kind of just be a little bit more on point on their attack formation.
All right. So after the credits, we pick up with Mulder in the hospital. Now, there's quite a bit to talk about here, I think. So, as I said, there are those flashback, those fragmented flashback sequences that take us back to what happened to him before. It's the only time we see them in this episode, isn't it? So I sort of wondering, Clara, is this a bit cheap in the sense that it's serving as a bit of a narrative shorthand? It's reminding us of what's happened, but then they sort of forget about these flashbacks, or is that a bit too harsh? Maybe we don't need to see them very often.
I think it is good to remind the audience of everything that he's just been through. Also, if you were watching this episode and you hadn't seen Dead Alive, and I don't know if the X-Files at this stage ever prepares for that, like if the writers ever prepare for people who are just happening to tune in to one episode, they're flicking TV but if you are one of those people that hasn't watched the previous episode just because you watched the X-Files intermittently, or this is the first time you've ever seen the X-Files, you won't know why he's in hospital. So that little clip, those short flashbacks will show you that he has been tortured and abducted, and that he's, got scars from it. And he's what I think I'm kind of confused about, and I'm not sure it's ever clearly explained, or it is, and I just completely forgotten it, is how is it that Mulder remembers what happened to him while he was abducted, but Scully doesn't really remember for a long time, if ever completely, what happened to her when she was abducted? I guess she's supposed to be abducted by different people and different situations and different tests, right?
Yeah.
But it's a bit... And the fact that he doesn't ever really talk about it with anybody, I guess maybe that's PTSD. Maybe they don't have time, like we said before, for him to be able to discuss it in any detail. But also how nobody asks him, what happened to you? I suppose this is all stuff that's happening off camera. I mean, this is why fan fiction exists, right? So that people can fill in those gaps. But the fact that Scully doesn't really, or Skinner, I mean, does anybody ask him, what happened? Do you remember what happened? Because him remembering might actually help them in the case, might help inform them what's happening to other abductees. And no one asks them what it was like to be dead. That's a major issue for me. I mean, you know, no one says, do you remember what it was like being dead? Was there an afterlife? So I went off on a tangent there, but you know what I'm saying.
I know what you're saying, and I would like a bit more focus on his abduction, whether in this episode or elsewhere. I feel like this part of the season does need a little bit more on it. However, Luke, what's really good from his perspective is that when the doctor comes in, we find out that Mulder's brain disease is gone, and he's now in perfect health. Yeah, what do you think? The brain disease, not necessarily everybody's favourite storyline, but how do you feel about that? That's
fine. I think it's good from a plot point of view of where they're going to go with Mulder. What I particularly like about the scene is actually Duchovny's or Mulder's reaction to the news, which is almost nothing. It's almost a disconnection from what he's been told, and that's what I really enjoy about this scene. And Scully is expecting this kind of delightful, happy news that he now no longer is dying from this deteriorating brain disease. But his reaction is almost very cold and disconnected. But it's because he's having trouble kind of processing information and kind of being where he is. And even though you said, Carl, it would have been nice maybe in another episode to explore this a bit more, I think if we're going to get anything in this episode about it, I think he does a really good job of conveying that in the scene.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, actually, isn't it, Clara? Because it's like Mulder is lacking, even though he's making some of the jokes we maybe would expect from him. Like it's I think his first scene, isn't it, where he makes the Austin Powers quip. But like he's lacking the sort of dynamism the viewer probably wants to see from him at this point, I would guess, or a lot of viewers would, because he's been away for so long. And I do think it is quite well played, actually, by the actor. I think the writers handle that aspect of it pretty well.
Yeah, he seems like he's kind of in shock.
Yeah,
you know, that he's kind of numb, and I think maybe that might be something that you could experience after such a strange thing to go through. I think also when they get back to the apartment, doesn't he say something like, "I don't mean to appear cold or distant"?
Yeah.
So he's kind of also aware that he's not reacting in the way that perhaps maybe Scully would like him to. Especially, there is a point where you're like a little bit like, is he going to say anything about her being pregnant? That's like the elephant in the room. So I think maybe it is kind of hinted at that he's not behaving normally, you know, but because of what happened to him.
Yeah. Well, like you say in that scene, he sort of does say, I don't know where I fit in, and he's having trouble processing everything, he says. And he alludes to the pregnancy, doesn't he? Because when Scully says that her prayers have been answered, he sort of says in more ways than one, doesn't he? So it's a curious scene. Have either of you heard the fan theory that there's a moment when he says he's happy for her? I think the fan theory is that Scully mouths the words, "It's yours," as in, it's your child. I don't know if either of you have heard that or if you saw that. Now, I looked at it again earlier, and I don't think she does say that. I think it's just a moment where she's struggling to formulate the right words, and a jaw sort of moves around a bit. I don't think she's actually mouthing something. But have either of you heard that or seen that before? What do you reckon?
No, I didn't catch it when I watched the episode. I watched the episode twice. So I didn't catch it either way, and I've not heard that theory. But no, it's an interesting theory. But I mean, later on, when the lone gunmen kind of talk about it, it's a bit more explicit in the fact, isn't it?
That's when Langley says something about we want to know about your involvement in this blessed event. That's what he says, isn't it? Yeah. Clara, have you spied that moment? Because like, if you haven't seen it, go back and watch it afterwards, maybe. Because I think it's an interesting idea. But like I said, I don't buy into the idea that she actually does say it's yours. But what do you think?
I think I have heard of the theory. I don't think she does say it. I think she's just a bit dumbstruck at how distant he is about it, because it's obviously his child. Because she's not using any other man's sperm. She hasn't slept with any other man. He might think she slept with someone else, but she knows she hasn't. And then if it's not his and it's not some other man's, then it is a immaculate conception, and then we've got a whole lot of other stuff to worry about. Then I would think she'd be very alarmed. I mean, I think she might be scared if it was an immaculate conception or an alien baby or something, right? So I think both of them know it's his. So maybe it's not something that they need to say to each other. I don't know. I do feel like her behaviour the rest of the episode is kind of informed by his reaction, though. She seems uncomfortable through the whole episode, and there are several moments where she and Skinner are in the same room as Mulder, and they both seem awkward and a bit weary of it all. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about some of the one of the latest scenes in particular. So, I mean, I feel like she's a little annoyed at him. It's not the reaction of somebody who's because we've had Per Manum, haven't we had Per Manum?
Yeah.
Oh no, we haven't.
No, we have.
We have, yeah. So we know that she really wanted a baby, and he really wanted it for her, and he was willing to be the donor. So, his reaction is it's not exactly happy for her, is he? Actually, when I was told a friend I was actually watching this episode for a podcast, she was like, "Oh, that's the episode where Mulder behaves like a crap baby daddy." I was like, "Yeah, he's a bit mean to Scully, and he knows he's the father. He must know he's the father of her child. Like, I don't know." He's not behaving in the most mature way. But then I guess you could say it's because he was abducted and he doesn't know where he fits in. And he's obviously obsessed with his job because he always has been, because it's his quest,
Yeah. Now, I think it's very understandable that he is reacting in the way that he does, given what he's been through. I think I can understand why that might be. Like I said earlier, I think that's actually quite a clever way to handle it. It gives us some interesting dramatic stuff to go through here. All right, let's just talk quickly about Absalom, because there's a few scenes here, but we can maybe do them together. So there's, this is the guy we've met him a couple of episodes ago. Obviously, he's been in this this run of episodes. The prophet, basically. In prison, he gets given that news clipping about the guy on the White House lawn, and then later there's that scene where he escapes, isn't there? Which is quite, I don't know, I find it quite amusing, where he crosses the train track and all of that. Yeah, Luke, you're feeling the same way?
I have problems with that scene, but I'll get to that in a minute. But I do love Judson Scott. I think he's got a great vocal presence. I love his voice. He's really kind of deep baritone and just a slightly creepy. So I like his performance. Yeah, the escape scene. Now I know that the X-Files kind of plays with truncated time. It usually says like the date or the time at the bottom of the screen when it changes locations. But he escapes in Bassett County, West Virginia, and then literally the next scene, he is in Washington, D.C. at Doggett's apartment. Now, I Googled this. It's 5 hours by train or 84 hours by foot.
Okay.
So I have a little... I know they're kind of, there must be a time period, but it just seems funny because there's, those scenes that are literally edited together, and it just seems like a weird time transition there. But, yeah, it's quite funny. And the whole chase scene, it doesn't look like he's running that fast.
It looks like he should be easier to catch, doesn't it? Is what I was thinking.
I mean, the guy's in a van, which is significantly faster than a human being.
Yeah,
it is quite funny. I agree with that, definitely.
There's also a moment which I had to rewatch because I was like, I couldn't figure out what was going on. There's a moment where so doesn't he pick up like a piece of wood?
Yeah, with a nail or something.
And then it looks like he stabs one of the prison guards. But it really very clearly looks like this actor has taken the piece of wood like under his arm. Like a fake stabbing. Do you know what I mean? I just did not look realistic. It looked like he just kind of smacked him or slapped him with this piece of wood. And then the prison guard says something like, get the son of a bitch or whatever he says. Because he's supposed to be injured. Yeah. I had to rewatch it because I was like, how is this prison guard injured? Like, was he just kind of pushed with this piece of wood? Like, it doesn't look like he's actually overpowered anybody. Absalom, I mean. It doesn't look like he's overpowered anybody, if you know what I mean.
It all reminded me a little bit of, like, I think is it Tunguska or Terma when Mulder outruns the horse when he escapes in that Russian prison camp or whatever it is. But it gets it takes us from point A to point B, I suppose, in terms of the plot. Okay, so there's lots of tension in this episode, and some of it is suspenseful scenes, and then there's also pretty tense meetings. So like there's a meeting here with Kirsch and Skinner and Doggett, isn't there? Where I think so. The idea is that like I say, I quite like this actually. That Kirsch is going to deny the application for Mulder to be reinstated to the X-Files. And they bring back this idea, Luke, don't they, which it seems like it's been a while since they've talked about this, but the idea that Doggett being on the X-Files has actually been really helpful in terms of they solve a lot more cases now, apparently. They have a greater success rate. You know, in some of the earlier episodes, like Tombs, they talk about the success rate or the arrest rate on the X-Files. So I quite liked hearing them talk about that here. But yeah, it's a tense meeting, isn't it? There's a good moment where Doggett jokes about only knowing what's going on half the time. I enjoyed that. What did you make of all this? Kirsch is being suitably antagonistic, isn't he, for all this stuff?
Yeah, I love any scene with James Pickens Jr. and Robert Patrick. I think these two have fantastic, tense chemistry between them. A lot of eye acting goes on between these two, which is brilliant stuff. But yeah, I love the underhandedness that Kirsch kind of basically says to Skinner and Doggett, okay, you're going to tell Mulder that he can't have his job back on my behalf. It's just like, man, it's so underhanded. And Doggett sees this and his eyes kind of widen at this, and that's when he starts to get his back up. And luckily Skinner's there to kind of lead him away, because I think otherwise Doggett really would have laid a punch and lost his job with Kirsch, because he did not look happy about it at all. What's interesting to me is kind of Doggett's motivation here, because he doesn't know Mulder that well. And I think his, you know, he says, I found Mulder, but now you want me to drive a stake through his heart, something like that.
Yeah.
But I think his emotional connection is probably more to do with Scully than it is to do with Mulder, and Scully's reaction to not having Mulder back on the X-Files. So I found that an interesting kind of thing going on in the background there.
I was also intrigued by, you know, this idea that, well, Kirsch says the FBI isn't a place for personal crusades. And a lot of this episode is about who's going to be the standard bearer on the X-Files, isn't it? And things like that. So I thought it was interesting that it comes up here. Clara, do you think Kirsch has got a bit of a point in some ways, even though he's not necessarily going about it the right way? But, you know, maybe there's a good case to not reinstate Mulder, perhaps, at this point.
I actually think it's a really good case for not reinstating Mulder. I think that, well, around the time that the X-Files was first being aired on television, I remember reading an interview with, I think it was like 2 FBI agents who were big fans of the show. And they said they loved the X-Files. They found it very entertaining. They really enjoyed it. But the idea of like actually comparing it to real FBI work was hilarious. In fact, they found the whole thing really fun and funny, because they said Mulder and Scully never seem to arrest anybody, and they never seem to, their the investigations don't produce like quantifiable results, and that would be a real problem for a professional FBI agent. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess that's the point there with Kirsch. I think it's funny that Kirsch should be like, the FBI isn't a place for personal crusades, when everything he's doing in this scene is obviously very personally directed. Yeah. Like he might dress it up as you know, this is to do with results and facts and figures, but he's getting Skinner and Doggett to tell Mulder, I think, purely just to fuck with everybody and to create a wedge between people. And I mean, one of my favourite moments in this entire scene is when Skinner, like exactly what Luke was saying, when Skinner first walks into the office and he and Kirsch just look at each other. And I actually wrote in my notes, oh man, they really hate each other. Like, I was like, wow, that's dislike right there. But yeah, I mean, I think Kirsch has got a personal crusade against Mulder. And obviously we find out more about this later, don't we, in this series. But I think Kirsch asking Doggett to tell Mulder that he can't be reinstated is definitely to humiliate both Doggett and Mulder. Yeah. It's not just about Mulder. He kind of wants to humiliate Doggett, and probably because Doggett found Mulder. And that's one of the reasons why. They're probably hoping that Mulder was never going to be found. And Doggett's sort of desire to have Mulder reinstated, or to desire to not necessarily, what does he say? Something like kick the chair out from under him, or whatever he says. Doggett's always got a good turn of phrase, hasn't he?
Yeah, he does.
He's just always so good. I think he feels probably connected to Mulder because he has heard Scully talk about Mulder. Mm-hmm. And he knows. So I felt like in this episode, Doggett's first impulse was to respect Mulder's experience on the X-Files. And I'm sure we're going to talk about it later, like his kind of pleasure at seeing him initially.
Oh yeah.
I feel like Doggett just really wants to help, and it isn't just to protect Scully, who he obviously cares about. It's because I think he respects Mulder, at least initially.
Yeah.
Before it all goes downhill.
Yeah, it does. Well, we'll come to that. But I think this scene with Kirsch, well, it leads us on to the scene then between Mulder, Scully, and Skinner, doesn't it? Where, they're telling him about what Kirsch is up to, and Skinner sort of says, like, he wants to hurt you, Mulder, sort of thing. What I find interesting is the way they sort of talk about it from there, where it's like Mulder's saying that it'll soon be the case that Scully's going to have more important things to deal with than the X-Files being open. And I think we sort of understand what he means, but I just wonder, is there something a bit reductive about all of this? Like, they don't even discuss the possibility that Scully... I mean, I'm sure she's going to have some kind of leave of absence, have the baby or whatever, but they don't even talk about the possibility that she could still be working as a mother on the X-Files. Do you know what I mean? It just seemed like there's a few assumptions going on there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's a little dismissive. I think also this idea that, like, you're going to have more important things to worry about than the X-Files. I mean, if this is the truth, if the future really is in danger, if aliens are really going to colonize, if the conspiracy is going to end up controlling all of us, if people are being abducted from being in the census, then that almost is tied into the fact that Scully's going to have a baby. Because, like, I guess I just feel like isn't the X-Files important because Scully's baby and Scully, then by virtue anyone connected to Mulder could be targeted by the masters of this conspiracy. And then also, I mean, how could you have a child and bring it into the world when that world is about to be colonized by aliens? Do you know what I mean? Like, I was like, I'm kind of sure even though she's going to be busy, I guess, like, giving birth and taking care of a newborn, this is still going to be incredibly important to her. And indeed to everyone on the planet, if this, conspiracy comes to fruition. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, this is...
Yeah.
It's like saying, you don't need to worry about climate change because you're going to be having a baby in a couple of months. It's like, well, no, that's not...
Yeah, it's not how it works.
I need to be more worried, actually, because now I'm going to have a child to bring into the world, which is going to be, I don't know, on fire or whatever. So I thought that was kind of... Basically, maybe what he means is you're not going to be able to be an ally to me within the FBI because you'll be on maternity leave.
Yeah, I think just maybe the reason why I'm pondering it a little bit is there's that sort of broader tendency, isn't there, with TV and with films and, well, lots of different types of stories, really. But you sort of get this tendency where men are sort of in the role of the hero, don't you? Or they're elevated to the status of hero. And sometimes there's this thing where women are sort of, quote unquote, reduced down to their biological function as a mother. Do you know what I mean? So you can sort of see some of that here, I think, with the fact we get all these references to Mulder's quest or his crusade, and it sits alongside the discussion of Scully's had her prayers answered. She's got more important things to worry about than work. And I know they've kind of paved the way for this for a few seasons, really, in the sense that, there are episodes like Christmas Carol and Emily, they're all about Scully's fertility. But I think sometimes they just sort of lapse into quite reductive ways of painting it sometimes, I think, in season 8, I think. But sometimes it works really well, and sometimes I feel like it just gets a bit too paint by numbers. It might just be me.
No, I can kind of see that. I think also we can question whether this isn't just Scully's quest now. The reason why she had problems with her fertility was because she was abducted. She was abducted because she was working on the X-Files. She's working on the X-Files because she wanted to have a good... interesting career, scientific career in the FBI. So it is her crusade too. And if we're thinking about Mulder's crusade, it started with his searching for his long-lost sister, Samantha. And we now know what happened to Samantha. So
yeah, you
could argue that he could, he's not going to, because of course he is who he is, personality who he is. But you could argue that, in fact, actually Mulder has achieved what he was looking for, which was his sister. Maybe he should step away from the X-Files now and let somebody else, So I think you're right. It is a little bit reductive, definitely. I mean, it does get worse though as it goes on, and then it gets worse. I would say even beyond this season 9 and the truth, and I think we'll end up in season 10 and 11, and it just kind of continues. And I mean, that's open to debate. I know a lot of people feel differently about that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you're right. It's, I mean, Scully did have other ambitions before she became a mother, didn't she? Like,
Yeah.
She's not just there to pop out a sprug. That's not just her life's ambition.
No, and there's nothing wrong with stories about mothers, or women who want to be mothers or anything like that. I think it's just that when you've had a series like the X-Files in the early days, it's quite smart with playing around with some of the gendered assumptions you might have about certain characters and things. In something like season 3, it's quite clever in paperclip how it's very much about this is Scully's quest as well as Mulder's now. And I think maybe some of that is not as finessed by this point as it used to be. I don't know. We'll come back to this because there are more things to talk about with Scully as we go through, I think. Yeah, look, there's that scene, isn't there, where it seems like learning about Doggett is what almost spurs Mulder back into action, isn't it? That's quite an interesting moment. I suppose is it understandable that he'd be wary about this person he's never heard of, who's been working, after all, on the department Mulder used to be assigned to, and all of that? Do we understand why he reacts this way?
I'm not sure I do, but I appreciate the way that they've written Mulder, particularly in the scene in the apartment where Scully says, I've been working with a new partner, and his reaction there is very, very interesting because I don't know, there's lots of micro emotions that go through that just in split seconds about what he thinks of that. And I think that also has a kind of snowball effect to when he does burst into the office later on. I think there's lots of different bits of information that he's compiled in his head that automatically he thinks, this guy wants to lock the truth away in the office. He wants to shut down the X-Files. And I think that's his immediate kind of primal response, because the X-Files is his baby. It's his life's work. And I just think that he thinks that any other person apart from Scully working on the X-Files is an immediate threat without him really thinking about it. He's a little bit immature about it, a little bit. I mean, just strolling into the office, is this Doggett? And then just, ready to deck him. I think he's a little bit immature, and I think he should have given John Doggett the benefit of the doubt, at least just to hear him out. Much later on where, when they're under time pressure and he's trying to get Mulder to leave the facility, I think there is a moment there where Mulder looks at him and, I think that in that point he does give him the benefit of the doubt. But those two kind of, that first instance where Scully talks about in the apartment, I think it definitely has a kind of snowball effect on how he acts later on with Doggett. Yeah,
what did you make of all that, Clara? Because I think there's that scene, isn't there? And then there's also a scene a bit later where, again, Mulder's there's going to be nobody in this office to put things together like Mulder is able to. And he's like, surely not this Agent Doggett. So again, it's another moment where I was like, again, it's just assumed that Scully's going to be kind of out of the picture. But yeah, what about his initial response to hearing about Doggett? Do we understand where that comes from, I suppose?
So I read that the writers had the idea of making it like they wanted to kind of create like a sort of environment, like a love triangle environment, like as in like that Mulder would be feeling some level of jealousy, whether it's professional jealousy in the sense that Doggett's working on the X-Files or that Doggett gets to work with Scully in a professional capacity, or whether it's some level of like romantic or sexual jealousy. I read that that's what they were trying to kind of go for, not necessarily overtly, but they were trying to inject some of that in. And obviously, at least initially from Doggett's side in this particular episode, we don't get that so much because he seems initially delighted to see Mulder. But I am not down for the whole like three like love triangle threesome tension thing. Like it just feels cliched to me in a way that I did not want the X-Files to be. So that feels more soap opera-ish to me than I feel the X-Files is better than that. So that's maybe a reason why I have a little bit of a problem with Mulder feeling immediately sort of negative about the idea of Scully working with someone else. The only thing I can say is if I was to give the writers the benefit of the doubt, it would be that maybe Mulder is aware that the FBI has been trying to shut down the X-Files for years, and that maybe he's suspicious that the X-Files would put like a skeptic or somebody who would shut down the X-Files in his place. As in more like a paranoia thing rather than a jealousy thing.
Yeah.
There is a great line in that scene where he talks about this is a magic bullet that was fired 8 years ago. I really like the analogy of that. That this was somehow in the planning years ago. This magic bullet that was fired, and it's just been going round and round and round, and now it's poised at the back of Mulder's head. There's just something kind of truly sort of Machiavellian and creepy about that idea. So that I thought was a very well written line.
Yeah, it made me think of JFK. But it also made me think of Seinfeld, because there's an episode where they do like a JFK riff where it's like the magic loogie, you know. But anyway, it's the courtroom, isn't it, in JFK, where Kevin Costner's like, and then it pauses in midair. That's the scene, isn't it, Luke? Yeah.
Yeah, basically, the Warren Commission, which was the first kind of commission put together to investigate that down the plaza, they came up with the most preposterous theory ever, that this one bullet defied physics by zigzagging all through these different people and stuff like that, and the American people bought it. And I love that analogy, that you know, this magic bullet that Mulder's been trying to expose the truth of, you know, facts and the truth of what's happening, and this magic bullet theory is here to basically debunk that and try and dupe the American people into believing something that's happening when Mulder's trying to expose that. So that's the connection I made to the magic bullet theory.
I suppose from Mulder's perspective, he's probably thinking, well, look, Alex Krycek was assigned to the X-Files, Jeffrey Spender was assigned to the X-Files. You know, apart from when Scully was assigned, it doesn't tend to work out that well. So maybe that's why he bristles at Doggett a bit. And like I say, maybe it's consistent with a broader sense that he's having some irritability and issues to do with something like PTSD, perhaps. Okay, so there's actually lots going on in this part of the episode, because obviously Doggett gets taken away by Absalom and all that stuff. We get this idea of the covert hidden invasion that could be going on. And I also want to talk about that scene where they get that text from Mulder, where Mulder's texting now. He's back. He's texting. It's like, where is everybody? Come on down. So I think it's quite clever, again, having him back down in that office, because it isn't the triumphant return to this setting that we might have craved, is it, or anticipated. So I like that it denies us some of the things we might have been hoping to see. You know, like the fact that we have Mulder giving out a few of his quips, but he's doing it in a really muted way. The fact that Kirsch is going to deny his reassignment, all that stuff. We might have expected the status quo would just snap back into place now that he's back, but it's not going to be the case. So it's like when he says, Clara, who says you can't go home again? It's kind of like ironic, isn't it? It's like Mulder is home again, but it doesn't feel like it used to, you know?
Yeah, and I don't know if everyone else felt this, but I felt like he shouldn't be there. Like, my first thought was, no, don't do that. Like, that was my first thought. And then, because it almost seems like the wrong way round. Like, he shouldn't be sitting in the X-Files office, the basement office. He should be, like, meeting Doggett. And he and Doggett and Scully should be discussing this. You know, they should be working together. And because I think also because you sort of know that he and Doggett and Scully would make a really good team. Because even though Doggett is the skeptic, I don't think Doggett, in this episode, Doggett isn't portrayed as someone who's going to be in his way, a barrier. Doggett wants to help, right? Doggett's the one that goes to his informant, whether the information he gets is good or right or accurate or whatever, or is a trap or whatever. Yeah. But, you know, Doggett is the one who's actually trying to do some police work, like or FBI work, investigative work. He's the one that's going to his informant, like he's trying to help. So it almost seems like Mulder going down to the basement and sitting there and like looking through files, like without having sort of the permission of the FBI or whatever. Mm-hmm. Seems like he's going behind the backs of Scully and Doggett, who've been doing a lot of the work while he's been gone. There is a funny moment in this scene where he recognizes the guy who was the census worker who was on the White House lawn,
in the photo. Yeah.
Whose name is Howard Salt, poor guy. And the X-Files is always brilliant when it comes to names, and he recognizes him in the picture. And I think we're all a little astounded that with all the information in that big room of agents that were being briefed on this whole incident, that nobody recognized Howard Salt. I was like, of course I had to be Mulder to come back and just point this guy out on a photo. But Scully's reaction is hilarious. Yeah. You know, and then she's like, Yeah, he's right. Yeah. Like she just, yeah, he's right. Yeah, I mean, I can't even explain like their expression. She delivers. It's hilarious. It's just like she's kind of embarrassed. Do you know what I mean? But she also has to admit that he did pick the guy out.
Yeah, I suppose, Luke, in terms of should Mulder be in the office, should he not be doing that? But it speaks to that sense of dislocation that I think maybe you mentioned earlier, doesn't it? Like, where exactly does he fit in now? It isn't where traditionally you would expect to find him.
Yeah, this scene for me is quite important in that respect because you get a lovely sense of familiarity because he's there in his suit, he's got his feet up on the desk. You're like, hey, Mulder's back. But as Clara said, he doesn't belong there. And this conflict of ownership that's going on between Mulder and the FBI, essentially about who or what the X-Files belongs to. Mulder doesn't believe the X-Files belongs to the FBI, but he believes it belongs to him. So that ownership is why he's sat at that desk. But I think he's also aware in the back of his mind that he, this kind of dislocation, this connection to everything, displacement, he's really playing on the back of his mind, which is why his quips are subdued and everything like that. But yeah, the X-Files, it has changed hands or is changing hands. And that really comes across in this scene, I think. And I really enjoyed that. But, yeah, and I think there's a great line later on, which we can come to when we get to it in the evidence room, where they're looking for stuff on Howard Salt, which really popped out at me, which we can come to when you get there. But, yeah, I think this scene's it's very essential, I think, in not only Mulder, but the audience knowing that Mulder's time is coming to an end and that, I think his ownership of the X-Files is coming to an end as well.
Yeah, because I feel like we feel differently at this moment in season 8 because we've seen Doggett and Scully work on the X-Files up to this point, and I think by this point, we maybe not at the beginning of season 8, but by this point in season 8, we do feel that Doggett has earned his place on the X-Files. So Mulder's hostility towards Doggett, even after Scully has said, "I will vouch for this guy."
Reproach.
He's beyond reproach. It's like you don't trust Scully. Like you've always, not always, but like for years now, you've trusted Scully like implicitly, but not in this. And then Doggett's earned his place in the X-Files, and you kind of waltzing in and putting your feet on the desk as if this like it always belonged to you. And like you said, Luke, he feels like it belongs to him. But in previous series, I don't think that really was the case. Like his quest for Samantha belonged to him, but his quest in the X-Files was always about, I think, making the world better, like shining light in dark places, like exposing the truth to save the world, to save people. And this seems kind of selfish. I don't know. He's acting like a petulant child. Oh, sorry. I love Mulder, but he's being a bit of a dick in this episode, let's be honest.
Well, there was one moment I was thinking about, which is when they go to that evidence room, Mulder and Scully, to look through Salt's personal effects, don't they? And again, it's quite a nice moment in some ways when Mulder's like, he needs to make sense of what happened to him so he could stop it. And it's like, if it happened to him, it could happen to anyone. So on the one hand, I like that quite a bit. On the other hand, again, I'm thinking, okay, so again, we're getting this emphasis on Mulder's the hero with a quest who wants to make things happen. And at this point, Scully's being painted as someone who is waiting for something to happen to her in terms of this baby to be born. And again, it's just like, there's a bit of a dichotomy there sometimes more broadly, where it's like, you get this trend in pop culture where men tend to make things happen in a story and women assume a more passive role and things happen to them. And the X-Files for a long time hasn't been like that. And now it's seeming like it's sort of going down that direction. Now, to be fair to the series, Mulder won't be able to take up his quest wholeheartedly and all that. Even so, there are still times when it seems like a bit of an implicit double standard to me. And then the way Scully is written, Scully seems to buy into it a bit too, actually, when she says, if you go down, the X-Files will go down too. So there's that indication that she doesn't see herself as the department's standard bearer, So I think there's some interesting sort of contradictions here, where there are some nice things happening, but again, I think a bit of finesse here would have been good, Clara. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a moment as well, I can't remember where it is in the episode, where Scully says something like, you're being paranoid. She seems to suddenly have popped back into a skeptic role, when for so much of season 8 she was a believer. And she spends, I think, a fair amount of this episode acting like she can't control Mulder.
Yeah.
Or she can't persuade him. Or there's that particular, I'm sure we're going to talk about, a particular nasty moment where he sort of humiliates her in front of the lone gunmen. And what we don't want is we don't want Scully to become this sort of begging girlfriend or begging partner, where she sort of doesn't seem to have much agency of her own and is just kind of asking Mulder not to do things because she's frightened and she's worried for him and herself and the baby and everything. That would feel like quite a stereotypical female role to me.
Yeah, so I think...
But I mean, that doesn't necessarily happen, but I'm saying, well, that's what we don't want to happen.
Yeah, so I think one good thing about that scene is that then when Mulder finds that hard drive, Scully's the one who takes it from him and is going to get it taken to the lone gunman, I suppose. It gives her a little bit of something to do, at least, you know. Luke, was it this scene you said there's a line that you think is quite pivotal? Is it?
Yeah, well, I think Scully basically is arguing with him that he shouldn't be in here, and then she mentions something about the certain standard of credibility, and Mulder immediately hits back with, since when has an X-File not defied a certain standard of credibility? At least that's the way it used to work. As petulant as he's being at this point, I think he's actually got quite a good point here, because for 6-7 years, that's how the X-Files worked. It was. I think to a certain degree, he's got a point. But I also think Scully's being incredibly passive by not arguing back, which I think she would have done. Again, in the previous 7 years, I think she would have come back with a counter argument or standing up for herself. So, apart from kind of swiping the hard drive out of his hand, I think she is very passive in this episode, but in this scene. And then, I'm sure we'll get to it, but when Doggett tells her the password, and then she tells Mulder, and then apparently Skinner says she's beside herself for telling her this, I find that a very confusing character choice for Scully as well at that point.
You mean because they're sort of talking, you know, because it's going for all these intermediaries and all that stuff? Is that what I mean? Yeah,
and also, you know, she's like, I don't know whether I should tell you this, but she does tell him. And then she's beside herself because she's told him. I just find it. I don't find Scully as assertive and and has agency as she normally does in this episode. I think we've all said that she's quite passive in this episode. And I think those instances she definitely is.
And then why is she telling Skinner? Why isn't she then calling back Doggett and being like, "I told Mulder and I think he needs help"? Like, why is she telling Skinner? And maybe she's telling Skinner because she thinks Skinner is more likely to help Mulder. But then why does Skinner go and tell Doggett to help Mulder? Like, I think there's a situation here where the writers wanted to use these actors and they wanted to have these characters all together in the same episode. And so they're just giving them completely random, arbitrary things to do, which is basically, it's like a round robin like message. Do you know what I mean? So we need Skinner in this episode. What can we get Skinner to do? Okay, we can get Skinner to confront Doggett. Why would Skinner confront Doggett? Because Scully's called him because she's beside herself. So why would Scully call Skinner because she's beside herself? Because, you know, I was like, dudes, just put them in a conference room around a conference table and have them yell at each other or something. I don't know, like, you know, like it just, I mean, I almost lost it when Absalom was talking in riddles. I was just tell Doggett. Like, just, like, and he's acting vague, and Doggett's acting confused, and I almost penned a letter to Chris Carter. No, joking, I didn't. But I was a little bit like, Chris, you're just dragging out the inevitable so you can make, I don't know, 50 minutes of television. Like, just hurry this up, boy, hurry this up.
But he's a prophet, you know, he opens his mouth and these words just come out. He can't help it.
Well, eventually he gets shot in the head, so you don't have to worry about it for too much longer. So, you know. I think that's quite an exciting sequence, actually. That's when Doggett is walked into the building, isn't it, with Absalom at his back, and there's a bit of tension with the security guard and all that. Okay, I think both of you have mentioned, actually, the scene where Mulder and Doggett meet for the first time. I think it's really well played by both of them, actually. I think I love Doggett's grin as he's responding to Mulder, isn't it? It's really good, yeah. I think it's good. I think, you know, right at the beginning of the season, it made a lot of sense for Scully to, like, cathartically throw water on Doggett at a time when there'd be a lot of viewer hostility, apprehension about this new character. I think now we're probably on board with Doggett if we're still watching the series, or at least that's the idea. So I don't think we necessarily want Mulder to be acting this way. But again, I think that's quite smart to have him return and not immediately be everyone's friend. It gives him a little bit of an arc that can play out between now and the end of Vienna, doesn't it, as well? Yes. Did you have anything else to say about that encounter? I think both of you mentioned it already, but I think, again, just a well-played scene, and Skinner, fantastically awkward, kind of stood there watching him as well, isn't he, Luke? Where it's like, oh, come on, he's been away, you got to understand all this.
Yeah, I think Robert Patrick's superb in this scene. His incredulous smirk is brilliant. It's like, what's your problem, man? It's just like, but yeah, I mean, Mulder's got this predetermined dislike, hasn't he? He's just built this picture up of who Doggett is in his head without ever meeting the guy, and that all kind of plays out as a kind of playground or a potential playground scrap. But yeah, it's an interesting scene to begin with. Like you said, it's a nice mini arc because they're chums by the end of Vienna. But I do love both actors in this scene. I think they're great. And yeah, Paul Walter Skinner, he's going through some problems. It's really funny.
Yeah, like you say, they'll be best buds soon. Jumping off an oil rig with a guy is a good way to bond. I think that's what the implication is anyway. Clara, the lone gunmen turn up, and there's a few interesting things about this scene. I think you mentioned something, what you felt one of the characters being inappropriate in the scene, did you? Did Mulder say something? I can't remember what you said.
So Scully has obviously had a conversation with the lone gunman before Mulder has arrived about how she doesn't want him to pursue this or pursue it in this way. And then, of course, Mulder sort of says, this is America, we all know the person who gets the most votes doesn't win. Yeah. Doesn't always win, which is obviously a reference to the election between George Bush and Al Gore, and how Al Gore basically won the popular vote but lost because let's not go into it. But we all
in Florida.
Chad. So it's a little humiliating. Like, if he's got a problem with Scully, I don't think he should. Like, I felt that he was being mean to her in front of the lone gunman, which I did not think was appropriate. But it was nice to see the lone gunman again. And it's nice to see Ferreri obviously be delighted to see Mulder alive, and Mulder to give him a big hug. It's like, the two friends reuniting. It's really nice. And that was nice to see. And obviously the lone gunmen are really good at what they do, because as we see later in later scenes, they get Mulder and Doggett out of a tight situation, and they're good heist guys. I could see them pulling a heist if they'd ever turned their talents towards something, I don't know, criminal.
Yeah,
I mean more criminal than spying on the government. They're already kind of criminal, but they're criminal for a good cause.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's nice to see them in an episode
doing their thing,
and they do well here. And it's also, it sounds a bit silly, but I get kind of a kick of seeing them all kind of sitting in Scully's kitchen.
Just in terms of what it's not a setting you'd normally associate them with. Is that what you mean, or just?
Yeah. It's kind of. I think it's kind of fun to see a bunch of quirky, eccentric individuals discussing like government conspiracies, sitting in what looks like a very sort of routine American kitchen in an American apartment. I don't know. It's just funny.
Yeah. And I would also point out that line about getting the most votes may have taken on some additional resonances in the years since this episode was made. But we don't need to get into that. It's funny to hear Mulder call Ferreri Melvin, isn't it? I don't remember hearing him use his first name before, Luke. I don't know if I was just.
I don't think he ever has. I don't think he ever has. He's always called him Ferreri. Always has. So that was quite funny. I think those three, by the way, are superbly brilliant at acting very uncomfortable, because Mulder and Scully have had quite a few spats with them in the room, and they just kind of turn invisible all of a sudden, and it's just Mulder and Scully, and they just sat or stood there looking very, very uncomfortable. So those two get that across brilliantly.
Yeah.
In this episode, this is the first time we ever find out Doggett's middle name, though, which is J. And I just want to emphasise to the audience of the Xcast that his name is John J. Like
J-A-Y.
his parents. Yeah. Do you know? I just feel that's JJD is what his initials are. It's just a little bit extreme, isn't it? But yeah, we find that out in this episode.
When did we find that out? I don't remember hearing that. Which one was that?
So,
I don't either.
So when he's with Absalom, and who's also got a kick-ass name, and he's being taken into the facility at gunpoint. He's standing there in front of the guard, and the guard looks up his actual record to make sure he is who he is. Yeah. And up on the screen pops name, John J. Doggett. And I was like, oh, that's a terrible middle name for someone who's called John. Almost anything would be better. It's like, I don't know. I mean, it's like Carl, Clarence, Luke
Lewis Winch.
Luke Lewis.
LLW.
Clara, Clarissa Cook. It's just horrible. Anyway, but he can't do anything about it, poor guy. So.
And another man who can't do anything about his name is Noel Rohrer, who he turns up. It's not the first time we've seen him, of course. I think he's in Permanent. But we get these scenes where he meets up with Doggett here. And, it's all very 70s conspiracy thriller, isn't it? Doggett's got the umbrella. He's looking really, furtive. Rohrer's got that a hood, and we know at the end of the episode, we know why he's wearing that hood. We know what he's covering up with that hood. But it's kind of nice. It's reminiscent of some of those sort of deep throat type scenes from the past, isn't it? But different now. It's with Doggett, of course. Yeah, what do we think of Noel Rohrer? Do we think, Adam Baldwin, is he a good actor? I don't know. Luke, what do we think?
It's hard to tell because all he has to do is deliver information, and you can't really. Yeah, you can't really put a good amount of emotion into it. But he's fine. I do like that kind of callback to the old Deep Throat Mulder kind of scenes. It's quite nice. I do like that, and then the rainy day really adds to the kind of atmosphere of that scene. I don't think we get enough of Noel Rohrer until we find out that he's a super soldier. I would have liked to had him a bit longer to kind of establish him before we got. That kind of bit of information, but hey ho. But no, he's good at what he does, and it's a nice atmospheric scene. And 3 words.
I think that's quite a good point from Luke there, actually, isn't it, Clara? That maybe it doesn't have much impact when we find out that Noel Rohrer's an alien replicant or whatever at the end, because we've seen a little bit of him here, we've seen a little bit of him in Permanum. Maybe it would have had a bit more punch if he'd been in a whole bunch of episodes in season 8 before this.
Yeah, and if we knew a bit more about his connection with Doggett, I don't know. It'd be interesting if, he, an old army buddy or whatever, and then Doggett feels not necessarily an emotional connection, but he was a friend or someone. Someone that Doggett trusted. I guess he does kind of trust him here. Do you know what I mean? And it would be more of a shock. He reminds me a little bit of the alien bounty hunter from previous series. He's got this very sort of handsome American, impassive, blank face. In fact, the American bounty hunter, I think, was had a little bit more kind of sinister look to him. So
they're both quite physically imposing, aren't they? Quite big guys, I suppose.
They're both physically imposing, yeah. So it might have been more interesting to see Doggett be really I guess he is a bit like that later on, though, isn't he? He is really shocked, actually, when he finds out about Noel. Can you imagine, knowing him? Hey, Noel, would you like to go for a drink, Noel? Noel, how are you? Can you imagine using that name on a daily basis? Dear Noel. I guess it's a name, right? It's a legitimate man's name, right?
Yeah, I think so. I've only ever known people with Noel or Knowles, like Chris Knowles as a surname, but never as a first name apart from this character. But I'm just wary of the fact we're probably going to have listeners now out there who are called Noel. So I don't want to... Apologies, Noel, if you're in. There's going to be somebody with the middle name J. It's going to be like Noel J. Somebody who's just mega offended at everything you've said, Clara, in the last 5 minutes.
It was John and Jay together. Okay. It's not Jay on its own.
But no one's going to have the surname Raw. Come on, nobody can have a surname Raw.
No.
I mean, Raw is Noel Raw. Yeah, Mr. Raw does sound pretty awesome, to be honest.
Mr. Raw.
Yeah.
Agent Raw. Detective Raw.
That brings up so many different pictures in my head that I don't want to go into right now.
All right. Right, we've talked about a few of these scenes, so let's go to the FSC building. And I think you're right, Clara, what you said earlier. It's Mulder's there. I think the lone gunman, he's in contact with a lone gunman. They're quite good at doing their Mission Impossible type stuff, aren't they? It's like if Tom Cruise needs a new team in these films that are coming out, he can get rid of Simon Pegg and bring in Byers, Langley, and Ferreri. I think they do a pretty good job, to be fair. It's normally quite fun, isn't it, to see them do this stuff? Do you think, Luke? Like doing all the hacking and whatever, and the guiding Mulder through the earphones and all that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, always put them with a computer in their lap or in their hands. Don't have them running and doing actiony things because they're not very good at it. But
yeah.
I used to think they were great. They were the best in their office. But here they're really good because they've got laptops. They're doing their thing. They're hacking into security systems and stuff. I do love it when Scully rings them and all three of them pick up the phone. I think that's a great moment. But yeah, it's good, and it feels like old times. I think was it Redux that they helped him get into that facility? So it kind of a callback to that as well. So I really enjoyed this scene. I thought it was really good. I do think the facility is a little bit easy to get into. It just seems this flimsy gate, one guard in the thing, but it's fine. And then this weird kind of car park looking corridor until you get to this nice clean white room with two computers.
It's a bit easy, isn't it, considering how important all this information is supposed to be, I suppose. Yeah, that's a good point. What do you think, though, Clara? It's quite a suspenseful sequence, I thought. And also what's interesting, I like the way Mulder or Duchovny plays it, actually. When Doggett's coming in trying to save him and all this. And Mulder actually has quite a flat kind of affect, doesn't he, in his voice, which I think is quite an interesting acting choice in this context. Again, it isn't the really effusive, voluble Mulder a lot of the time that we'd maybe expect to have seen historically, but it makes a bit of sense to me why he's like this.
Yeah, maybe it's because he's intense and he's concentrating, and it's Doggett and he doesn't want to be distracted. And there is a point that I think maybe if Mulder had a moment to stop and think, he would think, if Doggett really wanted to stop me, then he would just stop me.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? He'd pull out a gun and shoot me, or he would arrest me, but the fact that Doggett is trying to convince him should be proof enough that Doggett really is trying to save him. I mean, Noel Raw isn't going to try and convince you. Noel Raw's going to kill you. Do you know what I mean? Like another agent who was, I guess, working for this whole conspiracy and trying to prevent Mulder wouldn't stand there and try and talk him out of it. So, cigarette smoking man wouldn't stand there. Well, maybe he would actually. So he likes to hear his own voice, so maybe he would. But so the fact that Doggett is practically begging him towards the end of it, it should be proof enough that Doggett is trying to trust. He wants Doggett wants him to trust. Wants him to trust him. The moment that I think I found most frustrating out of all of this, apart from the fact that I don't think the ceiling could take the weight of those two men. The moment I found really frustrating out of all of this was when Doggett says it's the tip of the iceberg, and I just wanted to scream. I was like, another iceberg, because I think we've got to that point a lot in the whole series, not just the season, but all the seasons, where it's I've glimpsed something and it's much bigger than any of us know, Oh, yeah. It's the tip of the iceberg, and about this point in the season, I think we should be well into the iceberg by now. And in this point in the series, and it's almost, if you almost feel like saying to the writers, you're going to run out of tape here. You're going to run out of time.
Yeah,
to do this.
It's like, how many layers to the onion can there be? Is that what you mean? Like the fact we're 8 years in and we're still getting all these new wrinkles and developments. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, in a way, and that sort of makes me feel a little bit like you don't have this planned out. You're not entirely sure where you're going. Now you're just kind of running with the next bit that you've just kind of guys have come up with in the writer's room. You need to start wrapping stuff up in certain ways, or having the whole story come to a head, come to an actual crisis, come to a dramatic crisis, invasion or whatever it is, some big thing. And the fact that you're not doing that sort of means that you're trying to drag this story out longer than maybe it should be dragged. I don't know. It's kind of hard because they obviously didn't know how long the show would go on for and all that sort of stuff.
I was going to say, sometimes they didn't know if they were going to be told there's going to be another, it often wasn't in their hands, was it? It was like what the network would decide. Would the network then greenlight a film and all this kind of stuff in the mix, isn't it, Luke? It must be hard to run a show under those circumstances when you don't know
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to take an example, Fringe, they had to do a similar thing at the end of season 4 because they didn't know whether they had a season 5, and they had to really wrap up. You know, fortunately, they kind of, I think they knew halfway through the writing stage that they were going to get a season 5, so they could actually write an end to season 4, but also have a standby kind of end of series as well. But I think with the X-Files at this stage, you know, Duchovny's leaving. Are they going to come back with a new cast? Which of course they did. So I completely understand Clara's kind of frustration there. I act the same with Noel Raw's line at the end where he goes, you know, it's all right in front of you there, John. It's all in the X-Files. I mean, this was said by Deep Throat to Mulder, by Mr. X, by, you know, by all these people. It's like, is it still the answers are all in there? So I kind of understand that frustration that, you know, we're nearing the end of the run here, or they think they might be nearing the end of the run here, with the hope that they're going to get another season so they can kind of keep teasing these lines and keep teasing these ideas and stuff. Yeah. So it's a hard tug of war to kind of keep balanced, I think, there.
Yeah, I would agree. And with that line you mentioned about it being all in the X-Files, that's very close to the end of the episode, isn't it? So I think at this point, does anyone have any final thoughts on 3 words?
I guess I still have a problem with the password being "Fight the Future," and I wanted to ask both of you. I'll start with Carl. Carl,
what is my password?
Would you have would you have chosen for all your accounts, specifically Disney Plus? No, would you have chosen a different password than "Fight the Future"? And if you were going to, what would you choose?
What is this? As in an X-Files related password, is it?
Or for this actual CD? I mean, or DVD or whatever. No, it's a CD, isn't it? The Rosetta Stone. Like, what would you? Do you know what I mean? Or are you okay with 3 words? Do you think Do you think "Fight the Future" works?
I think it needs a number, doesn't it, and an exclamation point to make it a bit more secure. That's my feeling. That's normally what happens, isn't it? You need a certain amount of characters. Yeah, no, I think it needs
lowercase.
It needs some more. Yeah, it needs some different cases. Yeah, no, it's not good. I think does it work on the level of just almost like a meta level of it reminds fans of the series about the movie, and it makes us think these things all tie together a bit better than they actually do. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it works better on that level than the actual in-universe level as a password. I don't know. Luke, what do you think?
I completely agree with you. I think on a meta level of trying to connect tissues that probably don't really exist, but they're just trying to put it there to kind of hock everything together, I think is the main reason. I think in story, I think on a basis that it's a password to some very, very secretive information, I think is a terrible password. I think it's quite hackable. So yeah, you need a lot of numbers and exclamation marks in there, and to kind of make it a bit more secure. But but from a visualistic point of view, I think it works on a certain level.
Yeah. Luke, any final thoughts? I mean, you said earlier like 7.5 or an 8. Have you sort of made your mind up which side of the fence you're gonna?
I think
not the White House fence,
just
yeah.
I think 7.5 because I think, like, talking out with you guys, there's some bits that fall short, particularly in Scully's passiveness and her kind of unagency, if that's even a word. But that's kind of knocked down a bit. The only bit I had. The only note I've had that we haven't covered is when Absalom's taping the pistol to Doggett's back, they definitely watch Die Hard.
I can't imagine Absalom watching Die Hard though, can you? It doesn't seem. No. I don't know what he would watch, but I don't know. All right, so yeah, let's go into this week's XCast listener mailbag. Okay, so just a few mailbag comments this week. We'll start with Tony Black, who says, "This one is great fun. I always feel it gets a bit lost under the shippiness of Permanum, the melodrama of This Is Not Happening, and the madness of Dead Alive. But it's a propulsive bit of mythology that has some great moments. A guy storming the White House, fight the future, more funky poaching from Mulder and the lone gunman, and there's a good layer of antipathy between Mulder and Doggett, which nicely presages Vienna and how they resolve that. I wouldn't say it's the deepest hour of the X-Files in the world, or the richest, but the pulp nature of it all, and just having Mulder back being Muldery again makes it all worth it. I don't know, is it that Mulder's back being Muldery, or is it that Mulder's back and he almost isn't being Muldery in some respect? Maybe it's a little bit of both, do you know what I mean? Like I said, he is giving out some of the one-liners, but he isn't acting exactly as we would expect to remember him acting before, maybe. So I don't know, Clara, is it a bit of both?
I also think it's the way everybody's reacting to him. Yeah. There's countless scenes where people kind of look at each other. He says something, and then the characters look at each other with the sense of, like, they look awkward, they look embarrassed. And obviously, Scully's been embarrassed on and off throughout the years of working with Mulder in various different situations, but it's normally played... is it normally played? I know sometimes it's played for comedic effect, whereas in this situation, she just looks pained, and Skinner looks pained, and I don't know, I guess I kind of didn't really want to see people... It's like people have moved on and they don't really want him there a little bit. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that's not how I really want people to feel about Mulder. So I found... when I was writing notes about this, when I was watching it, I just wrote awkward in giant capital letters numerous times because a lot of it felt very awkward. And I think some of that is to do with the fact that Mulder's not acting himself completely, or maybe acting like an extreme version of himself. He sort of veers between the two. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, so Baz Greenland says, really strong conclusion to what is a 4-episode arc, and season 8 firing on all cylinders. Love the reference to the movie and how it pits Mulder and Doggett against each other. So what do you reckon to it, Luke, as a conclusion to the arc, like Baz is saying? Because in some ways it is, and in other ways it's actually setting up the arc that's going to happen with Mulder and Doggett between now and Vienna, isn't it? In the sense that we're going to get to that buddy movie thing on the oil rig, you know? So it kind of, this whole back part of the season is quite serialized, actually, in a lot of ways, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, it's what makes season 8 stand out from all the rest of the season, apart from the event season, because it is heavily serialized towards the back end. So, yes, we've kind of concluded a arc of sorts in these 4 episodes about, finding Mulder's body and him being raised from the dead and all that stuff. But we are beginning another arc and continuing the serialization and Doggett and Mulder's journey and leading up to existence and all that. So it's an arc of sorts, but we are really continuing the story from here until the end of the season now.
All right, so we just got a couple more comments. So Kathy Glinski says, I think this episode gets a lot of criticism for not acknowledging Mulder's trauma and instead making him look like a bit of a jerk. But I think it's touched on as much as the X-Files ever addresses such issues. You may have to read between the lines, but it's there. I particularly like the scene where Mulder breaks into the evidence lab. He hints at what he's been through, tries to make a joke about it, but makes it clear that he's motivated not to let it happen again, especially to Scully. When she takes charge of stealing the evidence, it's a nice moment of reconnection for them. I suppose that's interesting, isn't it, Clara? Because we talked a little bit about that moment, but not in terms of it being a moment of reconnection for the two of them, more in terms of it just giving Scully a little bit more to do in this episode. So I quite like that take on it, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose this is supposed to echo all those other moments throughout the entire series where Scully's like, Mulder, what are you doing? Don't do this, don't do this. Like, Mulder, don't do the thing, don't do the thing. And he's like, I'm going to do the thing. She's like, don't do the thing. And then he's like, it's too late, I've done the thing. It's a little bit like that, basically. Yeah. Like, he's... And in a way, although I don't agree with him, going rogue and, like, ignoring Scully to a certain extent, he has got a point. This is actual evidence. It doesn't seem like they've investigated this thoroughly at all. No one's checked the hard drive of this guy's computer. He broke into the lawn of the White House with a gun. No one checked his computer. So he's got a point. He is doing the investigation. He's putting the I in FBI, even if he's doing it sort of in the wrong roundabout way. So it does need to be looked at. So.
What I find interesting about his quips and his humour actually in this episode is I think in all other circumstances he's used it because he likes to kind of rub people up the wrong way, doesn't he? He likes to make people uncomfortable with his kind of grave humour, and I think in this episode he's almost using it as a diversion, as a kind of defence mechanism to kind of not not get close to what he's experienced. So in that way, I think his humour and his kind of quips are really interesting in this episode, because I think there's a different layer to them than there has been before.
Yeah, that's a good point.
He's also angry, isn't he? Like, and to be honest, I think he has a perfect right to be angry. So I think his anger is understandable, not necessarily towards Doggett, but he was abducted, and he was tortured, and I think a result of that could be anger, and that could be displaced onto people you care about, and in lots of different ways. So,
I agree with that.
That's kind of realistic.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, last word then goes to Andrew Levitt, who said, 3 words does so much for the series going forward. It brings Mulder back into the fold, showing him up to his same antics, uncaring who he's pissing off in the process. It shows him struggling with what happened to him and wanting to prevent it from happening to anyone else. It turns Doggett into a pawn in the game that alien replacements are playing, and it establishes the path of the mythology for the last stretch of the season. On top of this, it has the rip-roaring pace of classic mythology episodes, thanks to the killer direction of Tony Warmby, who really brings this one home. There's even nods to Prime X-Files, with the heist into the census data complex being reminiscent of the one in Memento Mori. This sort of multi-layered, exciting storytelling is what made me an X-Files fan. Overall, it gets a solid 9 out of 10 from me. So great stuff. Good to hear from someone at the end there who really likes this episode, because I know that some people do, of course, and I think we've all had positive things to say about it with some reservations to various extents. But yeah, we'll leave it there. So we'll talk briefly about where we can be found online, I suppose. Luke, how about you? You're doing loads of podcasting and stuff these days, aren't you? What's the best place to find you?
You can find me on the We Made This network. I'm currently recording the season 4 coverage of Fringe on my podcast, Observing the Pattern. That goes live. In fact, that will be live by the time this goes out, so we'll be kind of deep into season 4 then. So you can find me there. The best place to find me is lukewinch.com, where you can find links to all my podcasts and also my science fiction fantasy book blog, where I do book reviews and a fortnightly blog. And there is also a new book podcast called Turn of a Page, which is starting very soon. And you can find that on the We Made This network as well.
Great stuff. And Clara, how about you?
So you can find me on Twitter at ClaraJeanMC, and I run a podcast that's not connected to the X-Files, although we did do an episode on Scully at one point. It's called The Tales We Tell, and it's a podcast about women and gender in film, television, and fiction, and you can find that on Twitter at The Tales Podcast.
And you can find me on Twitter at CKJ Sweeney. I'll be back soon on the Xcast talking about Vienna with Tony, I think, which will be coming up in a couple of weeks. That'll be good. You can find the Xcast on Twitter, of course, at the X_cast. On Facebook, you can find our page or the basement group. You can find us also on Instagram. But that's all for this episode. Listeners, my thanks to Luke and Clara. But until next time, always remember, trust no one.
Elsewhere on We Made This. Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast.
This was one you requested, Matt. Was there any particular reason?
Part of it is because it meant that I got to get onto Out of Time.
Oh, okay, so that was the reason. Right.
Yeah, no, ask me that question again when we do episode 2 of season 10.
I think I know what you're talking about on that particular episode that you might want to be on.
Oh, episode 1, yeah.
Yes.
But also, I think I'm quite a big Rimmer fan, and I always find Rimmer-centric episodes interesting, dependent on their quality. And this and the next episode, and I don't really want to go into something that is more relevant for next episode.
Free with this month's issue. Talking about double bass, did you ever play double bass?
No, I have touched a double bass, but I've never actually played it. I'll stick with a 5-string Warwick, and I'll be all right.
The only time I've ever played one was the short period I was at university. They've got one in the music room there, and I used to play it on its side like a normal bass. Although I'm nowhere near as big as Pete Steele from Typo Negative, so it was even more ridiculous when I did it than when he does it. Movieversaries podcast.
Yeah, I like, A New Hope. I like Strikes Back. I like The Last Jedi. I think Revenge of the Sith is pretty good, but like Rise of Skywalker can just...
Rise of Skywalker is terrible.
Yeah,
it's terrible.
You know what I mean?
On our podcast, we're big fans of The Last Jedi, and we do not like Rise of Skywalker at all.
Oh, maybe I'll fit right in then.
Maybe you'll fit right in.
But yeah, I can offer maybe a controversial take. Like, for example, I think The Return of the Jedi is not good.
Get out. Get out.
Hey, man, this is my podcast. You get out.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network. The Xcast and X-Files podcast was created by Tony Black and is produced and hosted by Carl Sweeney, Sarah Blair and Kurt North.
You can find the podcast on Twitter at the X_cast, on Facebook by typing in the Xcast, and in our group, X-Files Basement, the Xcast podcast fan group, and on Instagram at the Xcast pod.
Don't forget, you can support the show by becoming a member on Patreon. Our patrons get early access to episodes, behind-the-scenes chats with our hosts and a thriving community of X-Files, and other premium interviews and specials. To find out more and subscribe, you can go to patreon.com/thexcast. That's patreon.com/thexcast.
We are also part of the We Made This podcast network, full of popular culture shows, including our Millennium series, The Time Is Now. You can find all of our shows at our website, wemadethispod.com, or via Twitter at wemadethispod.
Thanks for listening and keep watching the skies.